Sales Wisdom Pod with Zoe Hartsfield. I guess it's Zoe. In French, in Quebec, we say Zoe. Nice to have you on, Zoe. Zoe has been working at Apollo for a couple of weeks now, so it's going to be an interesting convo. Apollo is one of my favorite company. I use it quite a lot for outreach, for my podcasts, everything in between. Followed Zoe's content for quite some time, and yeah, I'm quite thrilled to have her on and ask her a bunch of questions. Before we do this, pod's brought to you by podfire.com. That's my podcasting company. You can start or scale a pod with myself, get great guests like Zoe. Get great guests is tough to say, by the way, Zoe, if you want that. It's like a tongue twister. Get insights, get clients, and everything in between. You can start a podcast, podfire.com. Zoe, really glad to have you on. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about your role at Apollo?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Always a good time to end a Friday on a podcast like this. My name is Zoe Hartsfield. I am joining the Apollo team most recently to help them scale executive presence, the B2B influencer program. We're going to start a founder community and then just kind of build up an evangelism program here. So those are the four things I'll be owning. I feel really lucky. I joined a rockstar team and I just get to elevate a little bit more of what they're already doing. So I feel like they almost didn't need me, but I kind of like hacked the system, weaseled my way in, and I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, good job. Are you working with Dan?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, I interviewed Dan last week. He's a rock star. I think you guys are gonna bring it pretty far. Tell me about the evangelism plus community role, two things that are quite under my radar nowadays.
Yeah, so community is a bunch of different things, and it can look really different at every company, and every company I've worked for has approached it differently, but I kind of see it in a few different buckets. There's participating in existing communities, and then there's like starting your own community. And we're doing both. We're partnering really heavily with existing communities, going where our ICP is already hanging out, and then being a presence, being a value add, spending time there. But we're also building our own community, providing our own flavor of value, something different that isn't offered in the other communities that we partnered with, and not to compete with them, but just to provide another space for people to come for something really specific. So really excited to be building out the sales community, supporting Caroline in those efforts, but also we'll be standing up a founder community starting like next month that'll be explicitly for founders, CEOs, VP level and above go-to-market leaders to help them with go-to-market strategy. And basically, like, I get to kind of marry the evangelism and influencer program that I'm building and plug some of those like top thought leaders in go-to-market strategy into the founder community to give them direct access so that these founders can ask pros in the game, like, how do I scale a sales team? How do I write a playbook? How do I write a sequence? And they're going to have one-to-one access to these top thought leaders in the industry through that community. So really excited to kind of bring those programs together and provide value to everybody.
Love it. I had Specket folks on the pod. I had Chili Piper folks. I had Warmly folks. I had Gated folks on the pod. You were a strategic advisor at each. What does that entail, and what kind of insights did you gain from these roles?
Yeah, so I actually just like worked at Specket, but I strategically advise Warmly, Chili Piper, Gated. And I mean, it's different at every company. Strategic advisor is an interesting title. I think people more senior than me probably like deserve the title more than I do, but I have developed something of a skill set when it comes to like personal brand, ghostwriting, and social selling. And I was like a pretty successful SDR back when I was in sales, as well as I've learned a lot in my community journey. So I kind of focus on those topics and usually very specifically advise on those topics. So if somebody's like, hey, thinking about trying to build a community, how would you do it? I kind of lay out my framework of like, these are the two paths. This is how I would do it. Here's like the resources I've already built. Also, just kind of like giving them access to my network. I think it just depends on the relationship. Like, perfect example, Gated, I feel really lucky because Melissa is an incredible marketer herself. And really that's like a symbiotic relationship. Like we meet, every couple of weeks and we just riff on ideas, like whatever I'm working on, whatever she's working on. Can I help her with something creative? Can she help me with something creative? Like, it's kind of just nice when you're on a small team. And I was before I was at Apollo, to have other people in your sphere who are really talented and smarter than you, especially in things you're not good at, to kind of just come together and be like, all right, I don't have a team, but I can like borrow you for an hour a month and pretend like I have a team, and let's like brainstorm together, and let me give you something. And so that's a lot of what the advisor relationships that I have turned into. And I really appreciate it because, you know, I love being able to support other businesses where my friends work.
So do you get paid hourly? Like what's the payment model here? And how do you split your time between all of these roles and activities?
Yeah, of course. So it's different at every company. Like some of the earlier relationships I have, I'm not paid at all. Some of them I'm paid out quarterly, like a stipend. Some of them I'm paid in equity. So I have 2 that are paid in like an actual cash comp. I have 2 that are paid in equity. I have one that's not on my profile that was like a tool trade. And then I have one that's just like unpaid, and they just like hype me up from time to time. But it was the first one I signed with. So it kind of depends. I think from here on out, like paid in equity is like the model I would go forward, but there's also only so much time you can dedicate to those things. And like you said, like, how do you split your time? My number one priority is my W-2, always, like always, always, always. So making sure that I'm giving at least 40 hours to that is really important to me. But like taking a lunch hour and meeting with somebody for an hour, or taking 30-minute break in the afternoon and meeting with somebody, like sometimes I'll do that. Usually the calls end up happening after my like working hours, because I try to work between like 6:30 and 4 p.m. my time for the most part. So sometimes I'll take calls from like 4 to 6 for that kind of stuff.
Where did you get that ambition?
Ooh, good question. So everybody in my family does not work in the industry that I work in. They're in like kind of the more old school traditional professions. So like doctor, lawyer, CPA, professor, that kind of stuff, which is awesome. And I respect it. And I originally, the plan and expectation was for me to go to law school. And so I was just like prepared to do that. But I started working full-time when I was in college, and I loved working. I loved working more than I loved going to school. And I stumbled into an SDR role my senior year of college, and I was working full-time and in a sales role where I had like variable compensation. It was the most exciting thing to me ever, because I was like, are you telling me that if I'm like better at this and like work harder, that I make more money? Like, I'm not just like, because when you work retail, when you're 17 and it's like fold sweaters, and whether you fold them good or bad, like
So
you get
boring.
$8 an hour. Right. And so anyway, I think having a variable compensation made me really motivated. I think working in software and opening up my eyes to like other avenues of making money was really, really interesting to me. Sales really like kind of put that in me. But I also think I got like a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, because I ended up not pursuing law school. I actually bailed on the LSAT. I was supposed to take the LSAT the day that I had my final interview with the CEO of Dooley, and that was the day that they could do it. So I didn't want to cancel it. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I was like, I could take the LSAT again some other time. Like, it's not a big deal. You can schedule it, 2 months later if you want. But then I got the job at Dooley, and I just like never looked back, because I was like, I can't imagine a world where I'm as happy as a lawyer as I am right now. And I also kind of did the math, and I figured I could make more than I would make as a lawyer right out of law school before I would finish law school, like in that timing. And I just sort of never looked back. But I think the hunger comes from, I'm really competitive. I've got that chip on my shoulder because everybody else in my family is like, Zoe doesn't have a real job. She just messes around on the internet. And I don't know, I just kind of want to like prove them wrong a little bit. But yeah, I've always been competitive.
Love this story. Love the explanation too, because a lot of folks are not able to explain that. So it shows some self-consciousness there. So good job.
Thanks.
Questions for you though. The SDR part, how did you make it happen? Like, what were your techniques? What could make you successful? How much did you make? Because the background of that is most SDR fail flat on their face when they start that job. I certainly was that way. They converted me into a CMO because I was good at marketing, but I really sucked. My first 2 months in an SDR position, made 200 cold calls a day to engineers and architects with this French accent that you're hearing right now, got rejected for 2 months straight. And I ended up selling an RGB light at $200. And I had 5% commission on that or something like that. Fortunately, I was paid hourly. So how did you make it happen? Like, what's your trick, and what did you make in your first years?
Yeah. So couple different questions there. First of all, I utilized a lot of video in my emails, in my DMs. I also used like a multi-touch approach. So I would like give them a call, leave them a voicemail and be like, hey, sorry, I missed you. You're never going to listen to this voicemail though. So why don't you check your email inbox? I sent you a video voicemail there, because people read their voicemails like nowadays, or at least they did, 3 years ago when I was an SDR. So I would say, hey, it's Zoe, you're not going to call me back. Left you a video voicemail in your email. Check it out. And then people would go to their email and I would send them a video and be like, hey, Zoe here. Like, it's totally okay. I don't listen to my voicemails either, but you're you, persona, relevance, blah, blah, blah. By the way, if you want to like meet and chat about it a little bit more, I've got some strategies that I think could help XYZ. And then they booked the meeting. Like I had a really great meeting book rate on that like play. And I would do the same thing in my LinkedIn DMs. Would be like, hey, like, shot you a video email or something. Like kind of just you're having a conversation with yourself in their various inboxes until they decide to chime in, and you're providing value as much as you can. Because the goal is a reply. It's not always to just like book a meeting. It's just like, can I get them to like start a conversation with me because I've done enough research and provided enough value that they think I might be able to help them with something. And so those were some of the things that I did to be really successful. I was also lucky that I started at a company that had a very built out, at least inbound process. So I had a lot of training when it came to inbound. I was part of the founding outbound team, and we did not get a lot of training for that because nobody knew how to do it. So that was a lot of like the Wild West figuring it out. And that was how I started to figure out like, okay, video, multi-touch, do the research. And then I got very good at social selling and like creating content around the problem that we solved. And so that said, I doubled down on those things, and that's what made me successful. And like when I first started as an SDR, my base was 36. And people are always thrown off by this, but I try and explain that like my first role, like when it very, very first started, I was doing inbound and it was super transactional. So I made $3 for every demo held. My quota was 120 meetings held per month. I booked close to 200 meetings a month from inbound leads. So people would like download a free trial or like fill out a form on the website, and I would call them and be like, hey, do you want to meet with an account executive? They'll walk you through like best strategies. And then if the account executive would try and close them. And so I would book anywhere between 8 to 20 meetings in a day. And that was how I started. When I moved outbound, that changed drastically because I went from selling teams of 1 to 5 to teams of like anywhere from 100 to 5,000. And that was also cold outbound, like no inbound leads whatsoever. So you're calling and email and DMing strangers. So my quota went from 120 to 12. And that was just like really different. So really, really different, really interesting experience, fun to be kind of like that founding cohort of that company and build out that process. I learned so much. And then when I got that promotion, my base went up to 50 and OTE was like 58K. But I think I made 65, I want to say, in the 10 months that I was in that role. And then I moved into marketing.
Why did you move into marketing? Because marketing is more systematic, it's more techy, it's more, it's automating stuff for the sales team. So why and what did you do exactly?
Because I figured out that I was really good at creating content, and I found that the best part of my job was writing email copy and video scripts. And like, I just loved copywriting and starting conversations with strangers. And basically they kind of presented me with 3 options. It was like, do you want to get promoted to an AE? But at the time, the AE role would have been that sort of like SMB, VSB, really, really transactional, just like taking credit cards, doing like 8 to 10 demos a day, trying to close a 1-person deal, et cetera. And that didn't sound super interesting to me at the time. And then the other option was, hey, do you want to be a team leader, a manager? And I was like, yeah. And then they were like, it'll be 6 to 8 months before we need that role. And I was like, well, I don't want to wait around for a promotion. And I had built relationships like really intentionally with the marketing team. And effectively the VP of marketing kind of made a job with me in mind because of my success social selling and doing evangelism and community stuff. And so I ended up going into like community marketing and basically was like a glorified content / demand gen hybrid back in the day. And it just like got my feet wet and it was really fun and interesting. But then it opened the door to me being a partnerships and community manager at my next role. So it was kind of the perfect segue.
And you've got 40K followers on your LinkedIn. So how does one build that?
Yeah, so it actually happened probably after I left that company. Like when I went to a company called Dooley, I started doubling down. Like part of the reason they hired me is because they saw me starting to build a brand online. Like they hired me when I had like 5,000 connections or whatever. And it took me about 18 months to go from 5,000 to 35,000, which was really cool, like to just intentionally create content and like bring value to people and then see that turn around into like pipeline and opportunities and introductions and partnerships. And I just saw that like by being visible and helpful and vulnerable online, it was helping the bottom line of my business. And so I just kind of like did that as much as I could and tried to be as helpful as possible. But it was always with the end game of like, can I help somebody be better at their job? Can I offer them value with our product or service? Or can I just like connect with them on some level? And by doing that over the course of many, many months, I built a following and it's just been really helpful.
How do you do vulnerability at scale? Because these are like personal stories. Me, I'm an open book, but does that backfire sometimes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my take is like the same. Here, wait, am I allowed to swear on this? I don't want to like get you in
You can
trouble.
swear, like
Okay.
you can fucking
Like
swear.
the way I see it is the like correlation between how vulnerable you are, there's a direct relationship with like how much shit you're willing to take. Because like if I open up and tell people something and then they don't like it, like I kind of welcomed it in a way. So I think that like being vulnerable, you just kind of have to like gauge it. And there are certain parts of my life that I don't really talk about because I know myself and I'm like, if somebody made fun of me for this or like criticized me for this, I think it would hurt too much. And so I won't share that. But like in areas of my life where I have a thicker skin or I feel like it would really help somebody, and that's it too, is like you're not vulnerable for vulnerability's sake. You're vulnerable because you think it might help someone or make someone else feel seen or understood. So yeah, that's the way that I think about it, is just like, if somebody were to make fun of me or like criticize me for this, could I take it? And if the answer is yes, then it's okay. If the answer is no, then like don't post it because somebody's going to do that.
So you've got a marathon tomorrow, half marathon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be terrible. That was really dumb of me to like not have trained. I just forgot. I just completely, there were other things going on in life and priorities came up. And there was a part of me when I saw that email yesterday that was like, well, too bad. I'll just sign up for another one. And then I was like, you know what? No, I said I was going to do this. Like, I'm just going to put on shoes and walk outside and do 13.1 miles and we'll see what happens. And I can finish 13.1 miles. Will it be pretty? No. Will I run the entire time? Probably not. But I can complete 13.1 miles in a reasonable amount of time. And like to have accomplished that when I said I was going to do it, even when things are hard, like those are the moments that for me build confidence and self-esteem. And I think that's something you can fall back on in difficult seasons.
Yeah, you'll do it. I've been there, done that. My first half marathon was with my wife in Buenos Aires like 7 years ago. Just that you might walk like a zombie for like a week after. So get like a sports massage or something, stretch, and probably a Theragun would help the next day.
Mm,
Ice bath also, like yeah,
yeah.
more suffering, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you can do it. Good job. And by the way, I've done that to people too. I've bought them half marathons and they did it. My brother refused, by the way. Shout out to my brother. Public exposure right there. I'm never gonna forgive him for that. Anyway, next question. With Apollo, for example, like, I mean, it's a company that's skyrocketing right now, amazing product and so forth. I've talked to Dan about his strategy to grow the community, but what do you have in mind for the next 5 months of this year? Like, what are your objectives?
So a couple of my objectives are going to be build a founder community of 1,000 founders, VPs, and C-suites of startups, especially on the revenue side of the house. We're going to activate our influencer program. I've got 8 or 9 influencers on deck to really help them be successful, be partners and affiliates of Apollo, but also just be champions of like sales strategy and give them as much of a platform as we possibly can. Can we elevate them? Can we elevate their voices? And then just by proxy, because they are affiliated with Apollo, does Apollo get uplifted as well? And same thing with the evangelism and executive presence programs. I'm just trying to help people on the team, train them on like, here's how you create content online that resonates with people. Here's how you share your story to bring impact and create value. And again, it's like, can I build up individual people who happen to work at Apollo, and can Apollo just by proxy be uplifted? It's not so much is the goal to like have them talk about Apollo. Like, I don't really care about that. I want to build up the individual because they have a body of work behind them and experience and value to add. And I want to elevate them, and Apollo just gets to reap the benefit.
Nice. And where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Zoe Hartsfield. You can also find me on TikTok at Not Too Corporate. Pretty much like content all about sales and marketing and personal brand.
I'm Charles Cormier, host of Sales Wisdom Podcast. You want to start your podcast, podfire.com. Zoe, thank you so much.